Delighted to be joined by Charlotte Nichols, who's the Labour MP for Warrington North. She's raised some serious concerns about the treatment of female MPs in Parliament. Charlotte, let me just start with a simple question. Are female MPs safe to work in Parliament?
I don't think that female MPs are, but I think that the people that are most at risk are parliamentary staff, particularly young women and young gay men or men perceived to be gay, who have the least power in the institution, are the most at risk and have the least form of redress of any of us.
And you've raised concerns particularly about your own party's handling of misconduct complaints, of sexual abuse complaints. That's obviously following Geraint Davies being investigated. Do you think that Labour's got a woman problem or a hypocrisy problem? What's the deal here with your own party?
I think the issue of sexual harassment and sexual misconduct is unfortunately baked into every single part of how the institution of Westminster operates. No party has clean hands on this, but one of the things that I'm concerned about is that I do expect my own party to be better, and we're not having the ability to have the moral high ground at the moment because we can't even keep our own house in order. And on a personal level and a professional level, I find it deeply, deeply upsetting. And frankly, if people aren't willing to call their own parties out, but they're willing to point fingers at other parties, you don't actually care about sexual harassment or sexual misconduct. You care about scoring political points.
And Charlotte, when you say that about keeping your own house in order, what do you mean? That women come forward and they're not taken seriously, they're fobbed off, they're told, oh, well, unfortunately, that's just what Westminster's like? What's the sort of environment if you do make a complaint?
I think the main thing is that within Westminster, our whips, the party as an institution, and Westminster as an institution hides behind processes that don't work as a reason for inaction. There have been concerns raised about a number of colleagues over a very long period, and the party have always said that they can't do anything about it in the absence of a formal complaint. And yet, miraculously, when the news about Geraint broke the other day, the party were able to take action and suspend him before a formal complaint had been made. So when they haven't done that in other cases that they know full well about, they're choosing not to act.
But when you say full well about, I mean, obviously we know situations where there are rumours that precede a complaint, but you do have to wait for the complaint to be lodged. Otherwise, we might enter into territory where some MPs are just the victim of a political witch hunt.
I don't think that is the case. And one of the things that we do see is that because of the way that the systems in Westminster, as I said, three failing systems, you have the Independent Complaints and Grievance Scheme, which is the parliamentary scheme, you have the party scheme, and you have going to the police as your options if you have experienced something. But one of the main issues with all three of those things is that unless the person that it directly happened to is willing to make a report, and there's a million reasons why someone might not feel able to at the time that it happens, even people who witnessed it aren't able to come forward, let alone people who've been told something by another person about what someone did to them. You can't unknow that information, but you're not empowered to do anything with it through those structures and systems that we've got. And that's the thing that makes people really unsafe within Westminster, because you know about people that are predators, frankly,
yes,
and they are allowed to continue walking about the place because sometimes their victims are so scared of coming forward that effectively they've got free rein to continue doing it.
Charlotte, I can hear in your voice how passionate you are about this issue and how personally you are feeling it. Have you personally been failed by the system? Can you tell me anything about that without intruding too much into your own privacy?
Yeah, I mean, I've raised concerns with my whips about a number of colleagues. I've mentioned previously that when I first came into Parliament, I was given a list of about 30 MPs to stay away from. This was people that I should never accept a drink from, should never be alone with, should never get in a car with or in a lift with. And this was MPs from all different parties, including a handful from my own. And as much as I found that shocking at the time, you know, that's approximately 5% of my colleagues that I've been told that I'm not safe around. I really thought, as someone who is a member of Parliament and within the institution and hierarchy of Westminster is relatively high up and protected because of that, how much worse it would be if you're a junior member of staff, if you're an intern, if you're a junior reporter in the lobby, who comes into Parliament in your first week and is told a thing.
When you said about not accepting drinks, the suggestion was being that maybe there could be MPs in Parliament that would be spiking drinks to make their female colleagues more vulnerable?
It's not just female colleagues, it's, as I said, young gay men and men perceived to be gay as well. It's something that we have seen happen, and one of the people who is currently not allowed on the parliamentary estate, it's because he was spiking people's drinks and assaulting them.
Is booze in general a problem on the Westminster estate? Do you think, for instance, that alcohol should just not be sold in Westminster?
I think that there is part of the issue where alcohol does play into it, but I think actually the systems and problems run much deeper than that. You have very late night sittings, you have a real blurring of personal and professional boundaries, you have MPs all acting as 650 individual employers for their team with no real HR support or oversight. All MPs are considered to be self-employed, which means that we're not actually accountable to anyone other than when it comes to election time, our constituents. And all of these sorts of things bake in those problems. Then when you add in the fact that the systems for redress don't work, that's a really toxic combination. But actually the majority of instances that we see of bullying, harassment and sexual harassment actually happen a long way away from parliamentary bars. I've had it where it's happened to me in meetings during the middle of the working day. I've had colleagues do things like inappropriate touching, their hand on your leg or on your back or making comments towards you. And I'm someone that, as I said, within the hierarchy of Westminster is relatively protected by virtue of being an MP. So how much worse it must be if you're someone who has less power in the institution, where you're more likely to experience it and even less able to speak out when it happens.
Have you been discussing this in depth with the Labour leader, Keir Starmer? Is he taking your concerns seriously? What discussions have you had with him about this?
I haven't had any discussions with Keir Starmer about this, although I have spoken to my whips and to other party colleagues on a number of occasions.
Is that because you haven't been able to schedule a meeting with him, or he hasn't taken enough interest? Should he take more interest in this?
I think he should take more interest in it, as I think we should see from our party's leadership within the party. So our General Secretary, for example, our Governance and Legal Unit, all of these bodies that are meant to be responsible for enforcing standards, for making sure that people are behaving in a proper way. Because as much as I've got tons of respect for journalists like Esther Webber, Aggie Chambray, Kat Neelan and others who've been shining a light on this problem recently, it isn't their job to make sure that MPs are behaving properly. It's our whips, our parties and Parliament that need to be doing that.
Yes, and isn't there an irony, Charlotte, just to finish, that it's usually the female MPs and indeed female journalists who shine a light on these sorts of stories?
Absolutely, and I hope that our male colleagues will start taking this issue much more seriously rather than leaving it to us to try to sort out.
Thank you very much indeed for your time this morning, Charlotte Nichols. Now,